Let's go ahead and start. I'm going to make a quick prayer and then we can start with this conversation. Dear Jesus, thank you because we can finally log in and find each other and connect. And please give me your Holy Spirit to be able to present whatever message you have for us today, and to have a little more clarity on what you want from us and how to teach our children and our teens, and maybe like learn something ourselves about the way that you designed us. I ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen now so you can follow along. Let's see. Let me share your screen. You guys let me know if everything is working. Let's see. Okay. I think that right now it's okay. I'm a little bit not so tech savvy. So I'm gonna, there you go. Closing the chat. I wish I could see all of your faces, honestly. Like if you want to put your little camera, I will appreciate it. Otherwise, it just seems like I am talking to myself, which is okay. I guess the nerves, it kind of calms the nerves, but but it's nice to also know there's somebody out there watching. Anyways, so let's start with this seminar. From what I understand, I'm supposed to give this in an approach maybe to like parents or maybe Sabbath school teachers or people that are in contact with the younger population. I usually give it for teenagers and young adults, but I'm going to try to give it a little spin on how to maybe teach this material to the young adults or the teenagers or I don't want to say children because maybe it might be a little bit abstract, but maybe we can apply it in a different way to children. But okay, let's just go for it. This at first, the first thing that I want to kind of point out is the fact that we need to have these concepts ourselves in order to be able to teach it. Like, if you didn't read anything about my bio, I have stepchildren. I have a stepdaughter who's 20 right now. I have a stepson who's 16, and I have twins that are toddlers. They're 2 years old. It's madness at the house with this pandemic. It's been very intense and interesting. But yeah, like I have these conversations constantly with the kids, the older kids, about these topics. Sometimes it might be a little bit awkward for some of them or not. But I think that they haven't been scarred yet. I don't think. Well, we'll find out soon. But anyways, the first thing that we have to keep in mind is in order to be able to transmit or like to teach or to educate our teenagers or like young adults about this is to actually like incorporate these concepts in our own lives. So you might find something that you maybe already have been practicing, or maybe you already think this way, but now when you listen to it, it kind of makes sense. Sometimes we don't really like sit down to think about it, to define the concepts that we have. And maybe now you're going to hear it and be like, yeah, I thought about this all along. I just didn't put it into words. So it's good to put it into words. That way, when you do have to, talk about it, maybe you're at the dinner table and this topic comes up and you're like, and now you have a little bit, maybe more tools to explain what you think about it. Or maybe this is new for you, it might be new for you. And so any questions are welcome. I'll read them at the end. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of time. And so let's just dive in. So I was very, like in school, when I was studying, I really, really liked the topic of identity. I think that that is the root of everything, especially our identity rooted on Jesus and on Christ. And I think that we don't really talk about it that much in our society. So kind of to talk about sexuality first we need to talk about our identity. And this is why it's important, because identity is who you are. It's a question of, it's the answer to that question. And nowadays we have like social media where we can just write in like 160 characters, a little phrase of who we are. And it's just so tiny and so little. And how do we define ourselves in just one line, And what do we believe in? These are the questions that I kind of wrote out to define what identity is, because it's such a big thing in our life. So who are we? What do we believe in? How do we behave? Why do we behave that way? What defines our moral judgment? And when I say moral judgment, that means moral judgment is the I don't want to say concept, but it's what actually helps us define what is wrong and what is right. Okay, so we use our moral judgment every day to decide what's right from what's wrong. When we're little, our parents teach us what moral judgment is. They tell us, don't do this or don't do that. You're going to get grounded. You're going to get a reward. And so it's like a reward system where we learn what things are good for us and what are not. But then when we grow older, we become teenagers and we start like questioning those things. And we start asking ourselves, like, why do I have to follow this rule, right? And maybe you have teenagers at home and you start realizing that they started asking these questions and started rebelling against your authority because they need to understand the whys behind the rules. If you don't have the why behind the rule, then that rule is going to fall apart. And they're not going to want to follow it because they're not going to see it doesn't make sense to them. They're not going to see the reason. So when you kind of start growing older, that moral judgment is supposed to change the way that we see moral judgment. It's not supposed to be so external anymore. Now our parents don't tell us. Now we have to decide. And usually people let society define that. I mean, we have laws, right? So that it's not okay to kill someone because you're going to go to jail. Obviously your parents taught you that. But then society is enforcing it as well, that it's not okay. So you kind of learned with the laws, what is right from what is wrong. But when it comes to relationships, when it comes to decisions about your life, how you're going to live it, then it's another ballgame, right? Because society doesn't give you a law for that. And so when we're teenagers, when teenagers are in that stage, they usually start looking at their peers to define what's right from what's wrong. And so this is what I always remind teenagers when I'm talking to them. It's a normal thing in their stage to define their identity by the group. Okay, it's something that's normal. This is developmental stuff, developmental psychology stuff. And I'm going to actually put it there. Erik Erikson talks about this, and this is one of the theories that I love the most about developmental psychology, because he talks about different stages. So he says that there are stages that you have certain goals in each stage, right? So let's say the first stage is when you're just born. The first stage is trust versus mistrust. So the baby needs to learn that their parents are going to give them what they need to survive. They're going to get food and they're going to get shelter, protection, because they're so fragile, and they can't really do anything for themselves. And so that's the first goal, right? So there's different goals in different stages that not necessarily are connected one to the other. So I don't have to reach a certain milestone in one stage to be able to go to the next stage. So maybe in that stage, that milestone wasn't reached, and then you just continue growing, and then that kind of stays there. So, when you're older and you go to therapy, sometimes they go back to your childhood, and they start kind of revising those milestones things that you were supposed to learn when you were little, and they find that there's some unresolved things back there that are affecting you in your life right now. Like, for example, the trust mistrust. Erik Erikson actually talks about the image of God being created in when kids are little, in this stage, that early in life when they're little. And why? And it's and I remember when I read it, I was like, why? And it's because, kids are going to have the image of God, of whatever the image of their father is. And we see that in the Bible, like God talks about him being our father so many times. And so if a baby doesn't get what they need when they're so little, they learn that their father doesn't take care of them, right? So if they have, like, in the first years of life, they have that lack of maybe love or protection, then they kind of learn that, and they transfer those concepts to the image of God. So when they're older, they have like trust issues, and you're like, well, where did this come from? And maybe it comes from there, maybe it comes from somewhere else, but that could be something, right? So Erik Erikson talks about teenagers, and in the stage when they're teenagers, they're actually looking for their identity. That is the milestone. And so they're looking for their identity, and they're looking for it outside of themselves. They're looking for it by their peers. And so whatever their peers approve of, then they kind of orbitate towards. And I always try to remember teenagers all the time. Like if I am trying to get my identity being like, maybe, I don't know, I don't want to say I'll confirm, but if I want to get the approval of my friends to whatever thing I'm doing, and they're looking at me to get the approval for whatever they're doing or whoever they are, then no one is actually deciding. Who's deciding what's right and what's wrong? Who's deciding what's cool or not cool, or like in or out? Like if everybody's looking at each other to find themselves, who is deciding this? And sometimes, it's the loudest kid, and I always say that, like, sometimes it's the loudest, the teenager that is the loudest, in the sense that it's like the most confident one, the one that kind of knows what he's doing, or seems like he knows what he's doing. And sometimes in the context of church, when we like see that dynamic where like the kid that's like rebelling against the authority or the older crowd, or like the parents or whatever it is that is like the enemy, right? At the moment, that is the kid that most likely is the leader of the pack. And it's not because he's right. It's not because they think that he's right. It's because he has more confidence when he's doing things, and he seems to know what he's doing. So everybody else just follows the leader, follows the confident one. And so it's like, who is deciding what? And so, it's hard to get a teenager to understand that. But if they are confident enough to change the narrative, people will follow them. The other peers will follow them. And so that's one of the things that we can work on with our teenagers, to understand that right now, even though the illusion seems to say that they need their peers' approval, like their classmates' approval, their friends' approval for something, they actually don't. And the more confident they are in whatever they believe in, the more they will attract people to follow them. And this is like, I straight up like 100% back this up. Like I was the same way when I was a teenager. Maybe like I was born with, yeah, well, I guess I am. I was born with like this like overconfident like attitude towards life, where I felt that I just could do anything and everything, and I didn't really care what people thought of me. And that actually helped me in the sense that whenever, I would put into practice what my parents taught me, I was able to change my environment because of my attitude, and not because of whatever other people's attitudes were. And now that I'm older, like sometimes we're talking with my friends, and then they tell me, my best friend one time told me, she was like, there's something that I learned about you, and you never, like, for example, we would like hang out and people were like drinking, right? Like I wouldn't drink alcohol, and it was like it was something that I had decided because naturally, I wanted to be a psychology major. I was always drawn to the mind. And so I always like thought of myself like, I don't want to put any substance in my mind that will alter the way that I think, because I don't want to make decisions right now that I'm going to regret when I'm older. And yes, it is maybe a concept that is like a little bit mature for my age at the time, but I was always very intense about that and very intentional about the things that I decided, upon, and I didn't want like any type of substance to influence my decisions. So I was very confident in my decision of not drinking when we were at parties or places or gatherings and people were doing stuff like that, or like drugs or anything. And I remember my best friend saying, like, later on in life, like now when we're older, she's like, you never told me not to drink. Like, you never like judged me if I decided to drink or not. You never said anything, but your example of showing me that you can have a good time and hang out even when you weren't doing these things just gave me the confidence to follow. And that was so, it was so important to me that at the same, like, to hear this when I was older, because it kind of like helped me realize what I went through when I was younger. And now I can put it more into practice when I talk to teenagers and about these topics. You know, it's all about the confidence that you have and what you believe in. And so, and this is why it's so important for parents to explain to their children the different concepts and the way that decisions affect you in the future, you know, and kind of like maybe sit down with your teenager and like plan out or ask the questions and be like, what do you want to be? You know, what do you want to be like in terms of your character, not only on on your career, because even adults make the mistake of defining themselves through what they do. And this is a huge mistake. We are not what we do. Like, let's say like in this pandemic, right? What if you lost your job? What if you can't work anymore? And if you were defining yourself by your work, right now you're in a huge identity crisis. And I feel you, because it sucks. But you need to be able to find yourself beyond what you do. That is the word, beyond. You are not what you do. You're more than that. And there's so many people that fall into that that rabbit hole of thinking this, and then that translate into other concepts that are deeper rooted in our society. Because if we start defining ourselves of because of what we do for a living, then we start also defining ourselves because of what we make for our living. So, and then we judge others by what they make, and then we fall into that, you know, in that trap of defining people or their worth by the money that they have. And, you know, that doesn't really translate. But anyways, we're not going to go into that because taking too much in this introduction. So anyways, Erik Erikson talks about identity. And so he says the only stages that do correlate is identity with intimacy, which is the stage of teenagers to young adults. Why? Because you cannot have intimacy without identity. And young adults, when they grow older, they start kind of letting go all the fake friends, and they start trying to just have few real friends in that stage, maybe the 20s. And the desire is to have intimate relationships and have like that one person where I can be completely myself with and can be intimate. And you cannot be intimate if you don't know who you are. And that is what Erikson says. And it's like, it just makes so much sense. And this is also another issue, and I'm going to try to like speak that. I try to issue like another issue that I see in teenagers nowadays. Teenagers are so wrapped up into dating so early in the game, right? And they're just trying to get into these relationships, and instead of finding themselves in these years, in maybe high school and stuff, like just finding answers to who they are and what they want to be and why they're going to behave the way that they behave and what they believe in and what are their limitations, what are their strengths, what do they actually need as a complement. And they're not thinking of that. They're looking into someone else, what I need myself. And they start dating, and maybe they have like a long relationship, and it's like, and the problem with having like long relationships in that stage of life is that they can kind of like their identity kind of becomes at the same time like with the other person. So we have like the high school sweethearts, right? That they kind of like grew up together. So whenever if they go apart, maybe they go to different colleges and they break up, they feel like that person just took half of who they are, because they kind of became this, like, I don't know how to say it, but it's like this fusion of like identities. You know, they just became together, and now it's like I don't know how to define myself without this person next to me. And they either go back to the person over and over again and just do like a codependency, like relationship type of issue, or hey, maybe they just go through a huge identity crisis, and it's like it really breaks them apart, and they feel like they're gonna die, because they have to like just build themselves back up again without this person, and it just feels like that, like you're dying in the inside. And it's a horrible traumatic experience. And then you have like the other kids that are just going relationship to relationship to relationship, trying to look for themselves in other people, and it's another way of making that mistake. And so we're just never going to find someone that satisfies us that way. We're never going to find what we're looking for. So we're just going to be using people and hurting people along the way. And maybe we find somebody that makes us feel good about ourselves, and maybe it lasts a couple of years, and maybe then we break up, and then we try to find another person that's going to make us feel the same way. And then when people don't make us feel that way, we just discard them because we feel that they have the problem. And this also happens with like people that, like maybe they didn't take the time to get to know themselves. It's like they find themselves at their 30s and they're like, I have to get married. Everybody's getting married. Let me just marry the person that I have right here in the moment. And then maybe they do, or maybe they do marry that person that was supposed to be their person, but they haven't done the little job of actually figuring out who they are. And when they get to the 40s, when midlife crisis strike, and then it's another stage that we go through, and we start looking back and we start asking ourselves the questions: what did I accomplish? Who am I? What do I want in life? And if we didn't do that job, then we find ourselves with answers that we don't like. And then we start thinking that the problem is the person that's with me, and because they didn't give me what I needed. And then we get a divorce, because obviously changing the person is going to change my problem. It's going to make it better. And it doesn't. Now we have a broken family. Now you're looking for all of these things that you were supposed to find when you were a teenager, and you start acting like a teenager, and we see like 40-year-olds acting like teenagers, and we kind of don't understand. And it's like, because they're going through that stage that they never went through, where they had to figure out who they are and what they want and what they believe in. And it's super sad because there's so many hurting people that are left. And so in a nutshell, let's just move on. So in order to talk about intimacy and what we want in this young adult stage of life, it's is that, vulnerability and just being able to be completely yourselves and just being loved and valued for that. And so intimacy, it says that basically it's closeness, it's togetherness, it's belonging, it's being vulnerable. It's more than just physical stuff. And sometimes we as adults try to like talk about it when we're like in front of teenagers. We say, oh, they were intimate with each other, instead of saying they had sex. And that is a problem, because then we start attaching the word intimacy with sex, when it's more than sex, and it has different aspects. There are more cognitive aspects, intellectual aspects, experiential, obviously, and then emotional aspects. So, to kind of break it down a little bit, I kind of, as psychologists, we like to break down the concepts. And so I found this Stenberg's triangular theory of love. And he basically dissects the concept of love and makes a lot of people take a lot of tests. And then he came up with this theory of what are the dimensions of love. And he said there's 3 elements that love has. First, intimacy. And he refers to intimacy as emotional closeness and affection and connectedness. That's what he calls it. So you can have intimacy with a friend. It's like emotional. It's me being able to be vulnerable with you and sharing this intimate feelings that I have, and you understanding them and connecting with me through that. Then he says that there's the passion aspect in love, right? It's the physical closeness, it's the romance, it's the sex. There's so many things that come with that, with the passion one, but it's basically a little more experiential. And then he says that there's the commitment, which I love his definition because this is the initial cognition of love and the decision or the determination to maintain it. So commitment is not only just me making a decision, you're my person, getting married to you, and that's it. Commitment is me realizing rationally that you are my person, me deciding that you're my person, and then committing to maintaining the love, to maintaining this decision every day. So it's not something you decide one time, and we also have that confused, oh, he committed to me. No, like he commits to you every day. Like he doesn't commit to you only when he marries you or when he proposes. He commits to you every day. And I'm talking about he because obviously I'm a girl, but you can, translate it into whoever. And so he says that there are different combinations of love, and we're going to go very fast through them. The non-love is when there's no intimacy, no passion, and no commitment. So when you don't have any of the three variables, there's no love there. Then he calls another one liking, when you have intimacy, but you don't have passion or commitment. And this could be when you have a friend. I like this person. We have an emotional connection. We have intimacy, but we don't have any like physical aspects or any commitment to it. Then he says there's the romantic one, when you have the intimacy and the passion, but there's no commitment. So this could be maybe like a friends with benefits type of situation. It's like we have some physical stuff. We like each other. We have some, connection, emotional connection, but there's no commitment. Like there's no relationship established. There's nothing official. And which we actually see a lot happening on society nowadays, like this type of relationships. Then he calls the other one infatuated, which is when there's no intimacy, so there's no relationship, emotional relationship, but there's passion, so there's some physical stuff, but there's no commitment. So this could be like I like you, I just met you, I like you, I'm gonna sleep with you type of deal. So it's kind of like what we see in our society as the first step, which is like super like not right. But anyways, it's like, it's the, it's how we see now the hookups, right? Then he says the fatuous, which is no intimacy. So there's no emotional relationship. There's passion, there's commitment. So there's physical stuff and there's commitment to it, but there's no relationship. And so then we have when it's empty, when there's no connection, no emotional connection, when there's no physical stuff, but there's commitment. So this could be like a marriage that maybe they're not getting along well in the emotional side, which leads to them not being physically together, or the other way around. Maybe they stop having like sex or something, and then that draw them apart emotionally, and they're just committed. Right. And then there's the compassionate love when there's intimacy. So there's emotional connection, but there's no more physical stuff, but there's commitment. So it could also be another type of marriage where we get along just fine. We're committed to each other, but we are not sexually attracted to each other. We're not like physically connecting. Could be also like maybe an old couple or something that just doesn't have the desire anymore or something. And so we see like so many different combinations, right? And then what we want and what he says is like when love is completely there is when it has the three things: the intimacy, the passion, and the commitment. And he calls it consummate love. And so what we see here is we see like the different combinations. And this means, I mean, you can be like, let's say married and go through different stages of this, right? And maybe you find yourself in one stage and you're like, man, right now I think we have a little bit of empty marriage. We are committed, but we don't really talk anymore, or we don't really have sex anymore. And then you're trying to figure out what to do. Well, you need to try to bring back the other dimensions. You don't have to leave your partner and go for someone else. You need to try to, commit to bringing back the other two. Or maybe you have a fatuous one where it's like there's commitment and there's the physical aspect, but there's no friendship. There's no emotional closeness. And so maybe that's what you need. And this happens a lot all the time, like, in different stages, and especially like, let's say stages where you have like little kids running around all the time. You're tired, you're exhausted. So sometimes you don't really have the moments, or like you have so many interruptions. You don't really have the moment to actually communicate and have a friendship and like share what the day was like. It's more like, just doing whatever you have to do, getting it done and going to sleep, and it's like, and the day starts again, and then you miss that communication and there's something off. And so, you can go through cycles, and it's okay as long as we are aware of what's happening and always aim to have the consummate love. And for the people that are like single, this is a huge thing that you have to think about. Right now in our society, we start with first like the physical aspect, and then it's like, oh, we hooked up or whatever. And it's like, sometimes like we see it like, well, maybe if I'm lucky and he kind of sticks around enough to get to know me, he will realize that I'm a nice girl and that he could actually call me his girlfriend one day, or like take me home to meet his parents. And it's kind of like, oh, and then maybe if we become friends for a long time and we're together, maybe someday he'll commit to me. And it's kind of like, you see it even in the movies. You see like the girl kind of like freaking out when the guy like introduces her as a girlfriend or something, where they're like surprised, or maybe they're surprised when they get engaged, and it's like, what, you kind of have to like have some sort of, suspicion that you're gonna get, proposed to. I mean, maybe you're surprised by the way that he's proposing, but not the proposal. You should have that relationship, with the intimacy, like that requires to know where it's going, So we kind of do it the other way around, and then we hope that someday they will commit. And even this guy that's not even a Christian, he's saying, girls, like, wake up and ask for that commitment before you move to the passion stage. Go for the intimacy, go for the commitment, and then add the passion. Because the problem is when you do it the other way around is that, you are left in a very, and guys too, obviously, you're left in a very vulnerable state where, that person, since they're not committed to you, they can just leave you. And it's very hard to be that vulnerable when you're not confident that the person's going to stay. So many relationships nowadays have that issue where they're like, oh, he's not committing. Well, they're not like committing because they're not sure of what's happening. Like, and they're not opening up, and they're not like showing who they truly are because they're not confident, in their relationship, because they don't see that commitment. And so there's a lot of issues that can be fixed by following the steps right in that sense. And I could go into a lot of examples, but we don't have that much time, and so I don't want to like consume it all. But anyways, if we actually go back to the Bible, we will find in the Bible the there's different words that describe love. And this is what's lost in translation. And I think that we are very limited by our language, and it's just crazy. Like, there's words that don't exist in another language, right? Me being bilingual, which you obviously can relate to that, because, you can notice because of my accent. There's like a word in Spanish that doesn't exist, right? Like the word awkward. That word does not exist in Spanish. There's no word to describe the full meaning of the word awkward. And that's one of the things that drives me crazy, because you can really use it and you want to explain it, it's so hard. And same thing happens with the other words. So in the English language, I love you is one of the only ways of expressing it. There's also the what I've heard lately is like, I care about you. And kind of that, but it's like there's not a lot of ways of saying I love you. In Spanish we have like 3 maybe, like te quiero, te amo, like it's kind of like a different level when you say I love you to a friend than I love you as with your couple, with your person, and so we kind of have that. But in English there's not a lot of margin, with that. And in the Bible, we have so many words for the word of love. We have, I think there's like 4 or 5 different ones. And we lose it in translation because when they translate, it translates as love. And we kind of enclose it into that. But there's so much more. Like, for example, in the word dod in Hebrew actually refers to the sexual intercourse, to the physical act of love and passion. So when you read Songs of Solomon, he talks about that dod love, right? And he uses that word in the original. And then you see that the word ahava, that's another word that is used as a deeper committed intimacy, you know. Then you have the word rasha or raya, which is the emotional friendship connection, which could be the intimacy aspect. You have the agape, which is, you know, the name of the conference, which is another type of love, the father and son type of relationship bond love. And so there's so many words, right? And so when we read like the verse where Jesus is asking Peter, Peter, do you love me? Like 3 times. We like kind of see it as, man, why are you asking so many times, Jesus? Calm down. He's not lying to you. But he's actually not asking, do you love me 3 times? He's actually changing the word every time he's asking. So he's asking him, do you rasha me? Do you ahava me? Right? So he's asking in different levels. It's like, do you love me as a close friend? Yes, I do. I do love you like that. But do you love me like this? And then do you have ahava me? Do you love me with such a deep, committed intimacy that you will die for me? You know? And so it just creates such a meaningful conversation in that moment that we lose it in the translation. And so we see that in the Bible, we have this dimensions of love, right? And I mean, I'm not surprised because God created us. So there is different types of love or dimensions of love that we need to learn about. And so when we read the verse, God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness. So God created mankind in his own image, the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And so I asked myself, what does it mean to be created in the image of God? What does that mean? What do we know about God? So what we know about God is that we have 3 different, like, I don't want to say dimensions, but yeah, like, or manifestations of the same God, right? We were taught always, and we've seen there, I was like, there's God the Father, there's Jesus, and there's the Holy Spirit. And when we're growing up, they teach us, you know, with a lot of fires, maybe the matches, and like you put all the matches together and it becomes one flame. And that's the Trinity, that's one being. So they can explain to us how that is so that we can like see it better and understand it, because it's hard for us to understand that. But the I am is a 3 in 1. It's one being, the Trinity, and they have the ability to create and to transform. You know, he is life and birth, and so he's a God that creates, and he creates humans, and he can't stop himself from doing these things. He does it out of love, and so then we have what humans are. What are we? And this is like the question that all philosophers always ask, and we're super confused all the time. It's like, oh, so are we a body? Are we a soul? Or what do we have? And so what we have come up with, and we have realized that we have a physical body, we do, and then we have philosophers call it soul, but I actually put the emotional aspect to it, because or like the heart, when we say, oh, the heart wants what it wants. Well, we're talking about the emotional stuff, the feelings. So we have feelings, we have the physical aspect, we have the emotional aspect of our beings, and we also have the cognitive and rational aspect of who we are, the mind. So we're always talking about the heart, the mind, and the body. And so those three aspects like creates who we are, you know. So we're the 3 in 1. We're one being, and one spiritual being. And this is another thing that we usually talk about. Like we kind of ask sometimes our teenagers, how's your spiritual life doing? And that's just wrong. Like we don't have a spiritual life. We are spiritual beings. Everything we do is spiritual. Now, whatever we do sometimes aligns with the will of God, and sometimes it doesn't align with the will of God. But it doesn't change that we are a being with all of these 3 things, and we're a spiritual being, and we're also a sexual being. And this is why sexuality is so big, because it actually, how to say, it touches, like, I want to say touches, it has all of the aspects in it. Let's just put it that way. It influences all of our aspects at the same time. It's not one aspect of our life. It's not that our sexual life is one thing separate. No, our sexuality is everywhere. It's in our emotional aspects, in our cognitive aspects, in our physical aspect. It includes everything. I want to say that's the word. And that's why it's so important. And we're going to talk about it a little bit down the road. And then my question is, like, whenever we see, God, and in which part of the Bible do we see the aspects of God, the being of God separated? Like when they separated, what happened? And when they separated, the only moment that they were separated, actually truly separated, was at the cross. And when they did, Jesus died. That was the result of that separation. And so it's super powerful to understand this, because when they separated, one of them died, or like one side or one aspect died. That is exactly how we are. So when we start separating our aspects and actually behaving like they're separated entities inside of us, something dies inside of us. And this is so important to understand, because in our society, Satan, I think the best tool that he used was to actually make us believe that we can live our lives separating these aspects. So we go through life saying, oh, it doesn't matter what I do with my body. It's not going to affect me emotionally, or it's not going to affect me rationally. Or maybe we separate, let's just give an example, not even a sexual example about that. Let's just give like a physical example of if I don't eat right, like if I don't work out, or I don't eat the correct way, it's not going to affect me emotionally or psychologically. And that's a huge mistake, because it does affect us. Because when we're unhealthy physically, we're unhealthy emotionally and possibly cognitively or rationally as well. Like, and we get depressed, right? Because we're not functioning well. We have anxiety, we have stress, and we don't know what's going on. And it's because we're not paying attention to our body. We're not taking care of our body right. Or when we just pay attention to our emotional aspect and we don't pay attention to our rational aspect. So there's like the people that just go and live life through their emotions and feelings all the time. And it's like a roller coaster, because it's like, oh, today I feel fine and I am good with you, therefore we're good. But tomorrow I'm mad at you and I'm going to leave you, and I leave. And then I come back again. And it's like the toxic type of codependent relationships where they're like go back and forth and stuff, because they're driven by their emotions. And there's no rational aspect that says, hey, pause right there. What are you doing? Yes, you're mad right now, but that doesn't mean you have to like break everything and break everyone around you just because you're mad. Or yes, you like this person, but that doesn't mean that you have to leave behind your family for that person. Or, there's so many things, like we lose our jobs because we can we can keep it together emotionally sometimes. And then you have the cognitive the people that are just about like rational aspects, and like they forget about their emotions, and they only think about what is good for them in terms of logic. And it's like, and we maybe kind of like, we categorize them as psychopaths, right? Because they're like, they see an objective and they use people without being connected to their emotions, or their empathy, right? It's like, oh, everybody's a means to an end. I'm going to do what I have to do, and I'm going to use whoever I have to use. It doesn't matter if they're like, however they're feeling. I'm disconnecting from that emotion of guilt or anything that could stop me from getting there. And so there's so many, and this is just examples, there's so many ways of being unbalanced in these three areas, and thinking that we can get away with it without any consequences, right? Like, let's say if we treat our sexuality, this is why it's so important, because it affects all of our areas simultaneously, but we think that it doesn't. We think it's just physical. It's just sex, right? It's not going to affect me emotionally. And it's just to give you like a little gem, right? We are like, as women, right? We have this, we all have this hormone, but it's called oxytocin. They call it the hormone of the attachment, the cuddle hormone, because it's the hormone that we release when we are when we're nursing our babies, right? That makes us bond with them chemically. And so the other way that we release the same hormone, the attachment hormone, is when we have an orgasm. So we're like literally like releasing an attachment hormone, okay, that will get us emotionally attached. Physically, we're releasing this. So we can't even control that, right? We cannot control that. This happens in our bodies because we were designed to be emotionally attached to the person we have an orgasm with, and like same with like with guys, sometimes, we kind of treat men like they can just, be more detached emotionally from their physical stuff. And yeah, maybe they have that, like that ability to be a little more detached than women. But then you have like, men that are like used to sleeping around with different people all the time. And when they grow older and they want to have like a more intimate relationship and they want to be in a committed relationship with someone, they find that they can't connect the person that they're with their emotional aspect because they've trained their body and their mind to just separate that so much, to have sex with normal people without being attached, like just anybody, and without being emotionally attached to them. So when they want to connect that again and they want to be in love with someone and they want to have a real deep an intimate relationship with them, they can't seem to connect it. And I've seen so many people in therapy saying, I have the perfect woman and I cannot fall in love with her, because they've just misused their sexuality for so long that now they have to go through a huge emotional process to go back and to kind of try to fix it and like try to start connecting that emotional, life to that sexual desire. Right. And so we cannot act like everything is separated. We can't. And we are one being and we're complete. And we reflect the image of God when we respect these areas and realize that that's how we were created. And we have also the ability to create and transform. And this is the grace of Jesus and the grace of God, that it's never too late for us, right? It's never too late because God can transform us, and maybe you're looking back and saying, oh no, like I did all these things the wrong way and now we're here, right? And God can transform you. It is not the end. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 chances. God will give you unlimited chances of going to him and getting transformed by him. And, kind of like, we got a hand. So that's also the matrimony, the image of the matrimony. When we're, male and female together, one flesh with God, we actually reflect the image of God. And I'm sad that we can't like go deep into it because we kind of ran out of time. But just to like maybe leave you with this introduction to sexuality, just to make sure that you understand that we were created in the image of God, and we can transmit that to our teenagers for them to understand, and young adults to understand that they have a responsibility with themselves on just being aware of all of these dimensions that we have, all these aspects of our being, that the more that we act like they're separated, the more consequences we're going to have in the future. And it doesn't mean that, oh, I did things wrong, or like I did this or that, and my life is going to go bad now. It doesn't. Like, it's kind of like, in a nutshell, it's kind of like, the people that are born with that magical ability of just being skinny and eating whatever they want. Not everyone is that way. I am not that way. My sister is that way. But I have to be working out. I have to follow my nutritional plans. I have to do so many things to stay fit and stay in a healthy weight. But there's other people that they don't need to work like that hard to be on that healthy state. So when you see both of them, you're like, oh, they're both healthy, but you don't know the work behind it, right? And it's the same way. Maybe you made decisions in the past that were not the right decisions for you, and now you see it, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't be healthy. Like, it doesn't mean that you can't have a healthy relationship or a healthy marriage. It just means that you're going to have to work a little bit more. It's a matter of decisions. If you haven't made the decisions yet, hey, if you make the right ones, you're going to have more probability of success. And if you didn't make the right ones, you're just going to have to work at it more. But we all can get there, and God can transform us, and we can all have amazing relationships. But it's just going to take a lot of commitment and just a lot of humility, and just letting God show us the areas that we need to change and give us the strength to transform our minds so we have the desires that He wants for our lives, and that we're also able and have the strength to realize what we have to change or to get help for the things that we need. And He's going to work in us and through us, and we're going to be that example of that change and of grace. And so this, I'm sorry that it was like so compact at the end, but I hope that you could maybe learn a little bit more about yourselves through this, and that we're all a little more conscious of the image that we reflect, God's image. And yeah, and I hope that, you know, that you can do it, and that you're able to, you know, kind of have your areas balanced. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to, let me see. Oh, okay. No. Oh, okay. Thank you for your comments. I thought it was a question, but yeah, thank you for your comments, and thank you for showing up. And I'm sorry, but I have to go. They're making me finish on time. So thank you. Bye-bye.